Welcome back, good people, to the Kaleidospoke podcast with myself, Aaron, and the wonderful Richie Rich. How you doing, sir?
I'm dandy. Thank you very much for asking.
Excellent. And you know what? I'm going to say something today. I just want to say, if you smell what the Musk is cooking, it's pumping the Bitcoin once again.
And the Doge.
It's pumping the bags. We're loving it. It's another great day to be alive. Another one in lockdown. But if you haven't already, please subscribe. Follow us on all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple, and in fact, on Apple, if you'd kindly leave us a review, we'd appreciate it to the max. So today we got some interesting subjects once again, going into the more personal, profound aspect of life, So to start off, we'll talk about something that we all kind of battle with managing, and that's our ego. It's a word that for some reason it's got like a negative connotation, right? Like it's like to have an ego, it means like to be boastful or to be prideful, and over time I've interpreted it as something completely different to that, So yeah, we'll be talking about managing the ego and how we kind of do our best to kind of stay grounded. Also, we will be talking about the differences between us when we was 20 years old and in our 20s versus now in our 30s, in our heyday, hopefully with a bit more bank in the pocket and a bit more knowing of self. And finally, we'll have a kind of, again, an in-depth look about how our journey as fathers has changed us and has created these wonderful beings that you're listening to right now. So that's a quick summary of what's about to happen. So let's get into it. So first things first, the ego. How egotistical are you, Mr. Rich?
Very.
Wow.
Yeah. I look at myself every day and say, what a nice looking guy that is. I am the greatest. If you're not going to say it to yourself, who else is? Come on.
It's true.
It's not love thy neighbor, it's love thyself.
I think it's both.
Fine.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, how would you even interpret ego? Like, what does that word mean to you?
It's funny. It's similar to what you say, right? It's you have this negative connotation, like, ego seems like it's overconfidence. I think that's what it feels like. If you say, "Oh, that guy's egotistical," that's like, okay, you're just self-absorbed.
Yeah.
If you say, you've got a big ego, you've just got a big head, so you love yourself, right? You have this sort of self-importance, right? And that's why ego is a funny thing, because it has this connotation, but everybody has it, everybody needs it, right? And it is like this fine line between self-esteem and ego that you balance on, and I think it's pretty much in a similar ballpark. It's only when you go extreme to overconfidence that perhaps your ego, that people will replace the word with confidence to ego, or
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I totally agree with everything you just said, man. It's generally, it happens sometimes. Sometimes when we look at something, right, we tend to look at extreme versions of it to kind of assess what it actually is. But I think that's sometimes a little bit inaccurate, right? Like yourself, I think it's interesting when you ask yourself, like, what is the purpose of your ego? Do you know what I mean? Like, if it was simply to just prove to other people that, this is who you are, then, where else does it serve a purpose in your life? And I think, I personally think, ego is one of these things like power. They're not good or bad. Like it's just a neutral thing. It depends what it's being moved towards, And I think for me, I definitely say my ego, or the way I use my ego, is to protect myself, for sure. Generally as an encouragement, do you know what I mean? It's the voice of encouragement. I think that comes from my ego.
Right.
Know?
Your cheerleader, like your inner cheerleader.
Pretty much. And I think that's quite a healthy thing to have. Do you know what I mean? Like, because you always kind of keep that positive narrative inside. It's like, the ego's quite strong today. So, you can do this 10K, no problem. And whenever I feel like, it's a bit too hard, I'm like, no, come on, you got this. Come on. Now, I would identify that as my ego, Someone else might not identify that as their ego, but I would see my ego also as a big part of my inner narrative. Do you know what I mean?
So maybe because the way you're speaking about it there, it feels like your ego is this inner voice, and to the outside person, or anyone external, it could be seen as confident. So your ego is telling you, your inner voice, and then you'll show up, right? Like, and it's like, it comes down to this like self-esteem. If you get a haircut, get your hair done, get your nails done, you have a boost of confidence, but your confidence is your outward looking face, but your ego is your voice telling you, hey, feel good. Like you've just got a raise, or you just got a promotion, or you just got a haircut, or, so yeah, it feels like there's there's, as I say, confidence and ego are like one and the same, but almost from a different angle.
Yep. Agreed. And like you said, that thin line, it's so easy to cross over, right? It's so easy to be like, oh yeah, you're doing something, and you're like, yeah, I'm the shit, and you're like, yeah, this is great, but then you say exactly the same thing, but outwards, and say, yeah, I'm the shit. And now it's almost as if, at least to the outside, that confidence is transferred into like egotism, or like an egotistical kind of thing, even though it's pretty much it's the same thing,
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
That ego voice, you need to keep it in, and just have a conversation with yourself and say, you're damn right. Or if you get an answer right in a pub quiz, there we go. You are done good. I'm smart. Yeah. But for you saying that outwardly, boastfully, then that's when it can easily turn to, this guy's just got a big ego and chip on his shoulder.
All right. So, in your opinion of self, how much would you say your ego directs your day-to-day behavior?
I think it's again, it's like a protection mechanism, right? Like it's almost, there's two ways. It could be a defensive thing that you look to your ego for, or an offensive thing. You'd say to yourself, your ego would say to you, hey, you got this, you need to show up every day because you're the boss, you're the man, you're the woman. For me, I think it's that self-belief almost. I wouldn't say I'm egotistical, and I would hope that I wouldn't come across egotistical. And even confidence-wise, I would say I'm an introvert, so my ego wouldn't be that obvious. Perhaps it would be more obvious with an extrovert, perhaps. And yeah, there are ways to show your ego that I don't think I subscribe to. So it wouldn't be that obvious to say that guy's got a big ego or whatever. But it helps me know who I am, and it's my self-image, right? Who do I tell myself that I am, and who do we all tell ourselves that we are? Is essentially our ego. And so how do you feel like the world interprets you? And I think that's where it comes in. It's your self-image. So you get someone with a dressing up in a pinstripe suit and sharp suits and Hugo Boss shoes or whatever, and people look at him and think, that guy's got a big ego. Yeah, he really believes in himself. He has this really high self-importance. So yeah, for me, I feel like I've got it like feng shui, the yin and yang. Like I'm just like uber balanced. Yeah. But that's just me being egotistical to say that I'm just like Zen. I'm like, I found myself. Yeah. Self-actualization.
Yeah.
The highest of high. Sorry, I'm going on.
No.
That's my ego.
But that's it. That's the crazy thing, right? That's the crazy thing when you start talking. You're like, okay, what is my ego? How much of this is my ego saying these things? Even if you say, I'm a super balanced person. I'm really spiritual. I'm super. I compliment as much as possible. Is that your ego trying to say, yeah, this is who I am?
Yeah.
Almost to say, all right, fine. So there's the ego. Let's say that's one narrative. What is the other narrative? Like, where does that come from? So if one narrative is from your ego, and that's kind of like the confidence, the level of self-esteem to a degree, what is the kind of yang to that, if that's the yin?
Perhaps the doubt, like those moments of doubt, perhaps, right? I think, when you fail, or not even when you fail, but when you procrastinate, or when you, when you fail, or when you think something's hard and you give up, perhaps that is the yang or the yin. I don't know which one is supposed to be which, but
I think you're right. Sorry to interrupt, but I think you're right. It's like almost the doubt of when you're faced with a challenge, when something's in front of you, and you're like, actually, I'm not so sure, and that's the kind of opposite to the ego. So you're right, because I didn't know the answer, if I was honest. I was asking you, but I had no idea what the answer was. I was like, I don't know what's talking. Is it my ego? What's going on? But then the correction is doubt, right? And again, doubt has a negative connotation, but if you take away that connotation, doubt kind of keeps you away from killing yourself sometimes, by walking down the wrong path, and also kind of keeps you in check with maybe your abilities, or what is available to you in that moment, kind of, and then between the two, you kind of get a reality, right? Like mixing the two, you get a reality. And if you're on one side too far on one side or too far on the other side, that's when it starts to pour out into the world and people can see what's going on. Like this is a person who's, he doesn't believe in them. He doesn't believe in himself. Or this is a person who believes in himself too much, and I think maybe the ego and doubt, like that's you're having this internal balance, and the closer you get it to the middle, the kind of better your life will be, or at least, maybe not your life will be, but the easier you'll sleep at night, if you've got that kind of balance in between ego and doubt.
How do you think, your ego plays a part in your day to day, and how do you think people perceive that, your ego with confidence? Sure. Because you're like I would say quite an extrovert, talkative guy. Like you come out and you've got a lot to say. Yeah. Everyone can hear you.
Wow.
you got a loud voice, bro. You got a loud voice.
Oh, okay.
So how would you?
I'm just gonna go home now. Oh, mate. It's funny because I didn't really think I was an extrovert for a very, very, very long time, and I would say if I'm an extrovert, it's just kind of like, in my own opinion, though, it's kind of just slightly extrovert, like 10% more extrovert than introvert. But that's my opinion of self. That's my opinion. But I would say I have quite a strong ego, but it's because my self narrative is I've spent a lot of time developing positive self narrative that's difficult to penetrate. Do you know what I mean?
Well, sorry, can you just explain how you've developed this self narrative to yourself? Yeah,
Boy, you know, like bare dark nights in the bedroom, just thinking, man, who's gonna do this but me? You know, watching Scarface, who's gonna do this but me? This is me.
Wow. Wow.
No, reading a ton of books, man. Reading a ton of books, and kind of just listening to the people that they may be considered to have a big ego as well. Like, but you know, their narrative is positive, and it's almost got me to a point where in my life where I'm like, you know what? All the other narratives are insignificant, which is hugely egotistical. But it serves a purpose. It serves a purpose. It almost like tunnel visions me. Do you know what I mean? But I do have doubt, for sure. I'm a human, you know, we're all human. But I definitely try to incorporate doubt where is necessary in order to kind of keep me, you know, 1 foot on the ground as I'm flying off to the moon. So
as I say, it's interesting, right? So, you know, we've been talking about the ego and, you know, it being a positive thing if you have the right balance, or it being a bad thing. There was a guy called Ryan Holiday who wrote a book called Ego is the Enemy. And, you know, there is this, you know, this group that of people, and people do think that ego is the enemy. And again, I guess if it's too extreme, it can be, you know, it can be problematic. So, you know, for example, he says, you know, you could take your concern of the self-image, but if it goes too extreme, it goes to the thing of obsession, like, you know, on the sort of scale of obsession. And then also you have confidence. So, you know, day to day, your ego would give you your confidence, etc., as we discussed. But then too much leads to arrogance. And you know, I think that's I don't know how fine this line is, because there is confident, and people would look at someone and think, wow, that guy's really confident, I admire him. And then there's like extreme confidence where it's like, oh, this guy's a dick. So yeah, I think it's situational and subjective, but it's interesting how, you know, the ego can get in the way of things, you know, whether that's relationships or you know, your progression in things. And I think there's this, you know, just something that I came across was like this. I think it's a UFC fighter called Shamrock, and he had this concept of plus minus equals. And so I found it's quite interesting, where it's like, you know, you should kind of have 3 key people around you. 1 plus, which is like that person who's ahead of you, and you want to like try to be like or aspire towards. 1 person who's like equal to you, that you can like spar with, and can, you know, just it gives you a good challenge. And then 1 person who's like negative, who's like, not say negative, but like minus, who's like behind you, who you can like bring with you and bring forward. So again, it kind of like that tries to bring the balance, or that's a way to approach balance. You know, you humble yourself by being, you know, shown the ropes by somebody, or you know, your position, and you see somebody that you aspire to, so you know that there's another level. And then again, you compete with, you know, your spar, and then, you know, you can bring someone forward that's you know, your ego saying that you're helping. So it's quite an interesting concept, I found.
I've never heard of that concept, and it makes so much sense, like just listening to it now, you know, because in that example, you know, you're seeing what you're seeing what you could be doing through somebody who's, you know, the plus, and then you also kind of are inspiring the minus, which actually at that point is kind of growing you as an individual in 2 ways. So that's super interesting, man. That's super interesting. It's funny. I'll tell you a bit an experience that definitely was very profound. And it caused me to confront my ego, which was again like quite a profound one. So, went to this ceremony, where, you know, we did some things, and as I was off with the spirits, let's say, I kind of discovered, I had a conversation with my consciousness, and the message was that everything is one, and you're all part of one thing, and you are not really you're just part of everything. It's all kind of meshed together, which was a beautiful feeling at the time, and it was amazing, and I've walked with that in my life. But for a few days after, my ego felt attacked. It felt like, what about me? Like, what about this is kind of taking away the individuality. Like, this is saying this is that's not that, And I was having these conversations with myself, like, all right, so I love the feeling that I am part of this huge thing, life. I love that feeling. That feeling gives me immense peace. But at the same time, my ego was battling with actually this thing. The ego is what drives you to go forward. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, don't get rid of me. Almost like I need you need me. So that was hugely fascinating to me. Very profound. It was interesting to me. Yeah.
No, that's definitely interesting. I think I would be in a similar position as well. Like if I ever questioned I guess it's like you question your purpose, right? If you just say your purpose is personal to you, and it could be a part of any narrative that you subscribe to, whether that's religion or not, and I think to think that you're just this small inconsequential thing as a part of the bigger picture is it's humbling for sure, but it does think like, what is your purpose, like what and I think that is definitely a challenge, but again, it's a nice experience to have, because again, we do need to kind of step outside of our ego sometimes and say, hey, it's sad, unfortunate, but we are just a number. We are just like this small element of the world, which is humbling.
Yeah. No, interesting, and kind of talking about existential crises. We'll move into our next subject of how you have changed since you were 20 and in your 20s, and now as a 55-year-old man, Mr. Richie Rich.
Wow. You just aged me by 25 years, bro. It's
a bit less than 25 years. Come on, it's not. Hey,
look,
that's
I'm
not
rounding
your age,
up.
bro.
I'm rounding up. Nobody needs to know. Yeah, I know. It's interesting. You're you're a lot more grayer. Like I look at some videos, and we're fortunate enough to have lots of footage, lots of videos, lots of photos of our 20s, which is, so sometimes it's a bit like, I look back and this guy didn't have a care in the world, living, pretty carefree, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and yeah, this is not to say it's all doom and gloom now, but it was a lot more light-hearted then. It's interesting. I guess back then the priorities were different. It was more, I wouldn't say completely different, because I've always had a level head, I feel, but materialism definitely came into the picture more. About sort of the name brands and the look, and again that ego, right? I guess how do you want to be perceived in the world? And it's not to say that I don't want to be perceived as a pauper, but I don't necessarily need a brand or need a name or need something to show that, right? I rather come from a place of intellect, and I think that's what I always still had that in my mind. Like in these clubs when I was we was with the guys spending money at the table or whatever, and that's all well and good, but I always had in my mind that you got these guys in the club and they're spending even more money. It's not a competition, because the bigger picture is X. Like the bigger picture is I'm investing in stocks, or the bigger picture is I'm buying properties or something like that. Like, I always had like this thing that, don't worry, don't look at that. Don't watch that. There's a bigger picture. So yeah, the clubbing and materialism, I think, was a larger part in your 20s. And, I guess if I was speaking to my 21-year-old self, I would probably say just go easy on that stuff. But hey ho, it was fun when it was.
Yeah.
What about you though? What about you? Mr. Aaron, Mr. 38-year-old Aaron. What would you?
Did you see,
given that we're just adding numbers, fictitious numbers for the sake of it.
Did you see my soul leave my left my chest when he said 38? I was like, oh, it's not too far away. Like you were saying, man, I'd definitely say in my 30s it's experience over material. It's interesting what you're saying about the way that you want people to perceive you in your 20s. You've got this battle because actually you're also trying to perceive yourself at that point. You're like, okay, what image do I fit in with? And I think you invest a lot more in that. But like yourself, I was always kind of level-headed to a degree. I was lucky enough to learn about history and studied economics, and I was never really the one to buy like the most expensive trainers or anything like that. I was always rather try business ideas. I was always like, people would spend £100 on trainers and I'd be like, nah, that's too much. But then equally I'm spending like £800 on some random business idea. Do you know what I mean? So, I was always like that. So, but at the same time, I think now in my 30s, the image I wish to portray is so different. In fact, it's not even that I wish to portray it. No, that's a lie. It's who I wish to portray it to. I think that's what's changed. I wish to portray to my peers who are with me in my 30s and my child and my family the man that I am now and will forever be. I don't think in my 20s I was thinking about that so much. It's more like, this is the man I am now, or this is what I want to do, or whatever. But now it's more like, okay, well, I'm probably going to be this person for the rest of my life. Not to say there won't be subtle changes here or there, but how does this person look to my son? How does this person look to my sisters? How does this person look to my dad? So I think the people that I'm appealing to are different in my 30s than those in my 20s, I think.
Interesting. So you didn't really consider that. Well, obviously you didn't have a son when you're in your 20s, but
I did.
You didn't really. Yeah, I know, but like not early 20s, right?
No,
like not the whole.
20s, no.
Okay, right. So just checking. But so you didn't really consider your audience, your main audience, to be who they are now. That's changed, you're saying?
Yeah, because I have more responsibility to them now. Back then you're still, your audience is, some people you grew up with, and you're all going on different paths, right? But I think in this stage of my life, 30s to 40s, this is the path I'm on, and if these people are still happen to be on that path with me, they're my audience, and actually their opinion of me matters, whereas not to say that opinion of those before did not matter, but a lot of those people aren't in my life anymore. For everyone went on different paths, and a lot of them are still very good, very cool with, but just the paths diverged. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. But how do you feel your 20-year-old self is different to your 30-year-old self? Do you feel there's much difference, or just the audience and the narrative that you're
No, there's a few more difference. There's a few more differences, man. Like I'm I don't have such a strong desire for acceptance. That could be part of my ego as well. I don't really have to be accepted. It's like this is what I'm saying. This is what it is. So, you know, you either get down or you lay down.
He's clearly been watching too many movies.
Bare movies. I got all the quotes today. Don't worry. But yeah, like definitely a lot less fucks given at 30 for nonsense. You know, like
I heard it gets worse when you're 40.
Probably does.
And 50.
Probably does. Probably progressively gets worse.
I could just imagine you just giving absolutely no fucks when you're 50, walking around, going down to the shop like in your boxers on a sunny summer day because you don't give a fuck. Like that's how much. Sorry, but I'm just
wow. Well,
you know, it's one of those things where like you're older and you literally just do not give a damn.
yeah.
And you know, I don't know. You've seen it. I've seen it in the movies. You know, you get old, you start walking around your house naked, like you know, answering the door to the Amazon delivery guy. Like, you don't want to get dressed because it's your house.
Yeah, yeah, defo. I mean, come on, man. That, at the end of the day, you get so used to yourself. Do you know what I mean? I've been here for 30x years now. I know who I am, and that's the other thing. I don't think there was like a huge questions. Oh, there was actually mid-20s. I think for many people, there's this existential crisis period, you know, where it's mid-20s, like, all right, university's done. You know, you might be starting off a career, or you might not have a career yet, and you're asking yourself, shit, is this what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life? You know, like, what am I trying to achieve? And for many people, they get this in their mid to late 20s. And I had that. I definitely had that. And coming out the other side of that, I know that type of crisis won't happen again to that magnitude. You know, like I discovered it. You know, that after that crisis, I discovered it, and it was like, oh shit, this is me, and it's been me ever since. And I think walking around as a 30x-year-old now, I'm confident about what that crisis produced. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I think in my 20s, I would be, you know, those questions kind of linger a lot longer, and they kind of go with you as you go to bed and wake up. It's like, shit, man, what am I doing today? You know, even if it is like, you know, there's a plan, you know, you got to wake up, go to work, blah, blah, blah. You're asking yourself, like, well, shit, is this what I'm trying to do? Like, what is this? Who am I? Was I designed to be doing this? You know? And I think in my 30s, it's like, fuck it. I'm still alive. You know, I'm still here. So this is good.
I think, you know, to that point, I have a similar like feeling, right? You come, as you get older, you come from a place of a bit more gratitude. Like you kind of have a bit more self-reflection and introspection. And, you know, I think that is just a trend that most people would experience. You know, as you get older, you appreciate youth, you appreciate time, you appreciate health, because you know, when you're 20, you're kind of bulletproof, or when you're 18, you're bulletproof, and then you're 20, and then the niggles start coming in when you're 30, and then you become to realize that you are just human. We all are human, and you know, quite vulnerable at that. So yeah, I think, you know, that vulnerability increases more as I've got older anyway. And I think that's just a trend that just as humans will just appreciate and continue with. And that might draw you to, you know, spirituality. It might draw you to yoga, and I'm definitely doing more yoga than I was when I was 20. So yeah, it's just it's a funny thing, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say as we get older, we get more vulnerable. And actually that, for many of us, that causes us to plan a bit more, you know? Like with our daily routines, we have to now incorporate stretching, or with our, I don't know, with our money, we now have to think about our pension or whatever. And that's simply because we're starting to feel it. Well, at least I am starting to feel it. It's like, okay, well, you know, like that doesn't feel like it used to feel, or that six-pack is not looking like a six-pack anymore. It was never a six-pack. It was never, ever a six-pack.
I was about to say.
It was never. But, you know, like, things are clearly changing, you know? So you're kind of having I don't know, for me at least, in my 30s, it's making me think about, okay, you know, as this gradually gets worse, what should my surroundings be, and how much do I want the people around me to kind of appreciate that don't move as fast anymore, like, and how much moving do I still have to do? I think that's one thing, right? Like, I think in my 30s now, I see people that are 60 or whatever, and they haven't quite made the right choices in life, and they're still like working hard, 65, like, but actually the physical capacity it's not there. So it makes me think in my 30s, damn, like, that day is coming, you're halfway there. Those days are coming. What do you want those days to look like, And same, I mean, we'll move on to it after, but in a short while. But same, I've got a little boy, so now I have to think about others that depend on me. So not simply my own future, but eventually he's going to want to go off to college, or, eventually he's going to want the latest Nikes, or eventually he's going to want his own little YouTube channel. I have to pay some ad shit, whatever. And then, all these things you kind of have to start thinking about, like, and it's all kind of future based, at least in my mind. Whereas in my 20s, I was thinking about the future. I've always been quite a futurist, but I think there wasn't so much of a kind of like undercurrent of urgency.
Yeah, I think, again, it goes to, when you're 20, it's like, it's all about me. When you get a girlfriend, it's all about me plus one. Then when you get a baby, it's me plus two. And the number gets bigger, as with the stress.
Yeah.
No, but just as with the, I guess your responsibility, right? As you said, we will talk about this, but as you have a child, you become responsible not just for yourself, but another being, and that just adds another dynamic, and that might come in many different times of people's lives. Could come early, could come late, and I think that's definitely one of the big shifts. And probably you might feel like you have this 30-year-old mind if you have a young baby or baby at young, because it just matures you quite quickly.
Yeah. I think you mentioned responsibility, right? And I don't know about you. How is your attitude to responsibility and at this point in time, and how has it changed from when you were in your 20s?
Yeah, I mean, it's got big, right? I mean, you're 20, you've got student loan coming in, you've got a part-time job, you're living. I'm living with some, in a room, like just rented a room, so limited rent. And so, what's important? Important is a car, get insurance, make sure that car's clean, and you got the good music in the car. And I think, as you get older, you get a mortgage, you get bills, you get subscriptions, you get, you have to, mow the lawn if you've got a garden, and go to work as well. Like 9 to 5 every day, you got to be at this place, and then depending on where you work, you might have to, you have to assimilate to the environment. So, it gets a lot more serious, right?
Yeah. I think my attitude to responsibility, I mean, it should have, but my attitude to responsibility has definitely changed. At this point in my life, I actually want responsibilities, but only valuable ones. Do you know what I mean? Like ones that are of good value. I want them. I think that builds my character as a man. The way that I have my responsibilities and the way that I handle them. Whereas in my 20s, I never really shun away from responsibilities, but I just wouldn't walk into them. It'd just be like, nah. That's gonna create too much of a headache for me. Whereas now it's more of like, actually, the better that I juggle these responsibilities, the more I don't know, maybe the more worthy I am as a man, or the more respect.
The more focused.
Yeah, that too. But more of it is like how I revere myself and how I am revered, based on how I juggle these responsibilities. Do you know what I mean? So, I think wanting more responsibility has definitely increased in my 30s. You know, however, again, you know, although I might want more responsibilities, only valuable ones. There's a ton of responsibilities that I will just look at and be like, I'm not walking into that. That's headache. That's dumb. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's easier to sort them out now. It's like, I'm not going to walk into that. That's silly. But then some of them are like, well, I can take that on. I got a space for that. Yeah. So this ties in perfectly with our next subject, which is, you know, as we've mentioned many times on the podcast before, we're both fathers of young children. And I guess what we were talking about just now really, really, really is kind of very similar to our change in ourselves since we've become parents and fathers. What would you say the biggest change in yourself you've noticed since you become a father?
I mean, first off, I mean, just being a father is the greatest gift that you could ever, you know, have, right, and be given. So, first off, it's an absolute blessing. I think the lessons that it's provided me so far, it's you know, it's having this sort of this new love. I had a daughter, and you know, she you know, she took my heart straight away, like this unconditional love. Like, as soon as you see that little being, and it would have been the same for a boy, you just, you know, you just have this unconditional love, like this protection, this protectiveness comes over you. And you know, it's a different kind of love that you experience of your mum or your loved one, you know, and that was just a big thing, you know, just that your heart just kind of feels warmer. And, you know, then you start to see the world in this brand new pair of eyes that hasn't experienced things. And, you know, I remember times when I've walked to the park or walked to the shops with my daughter, and you know, she'll stop at this and look at the smallest of things, right? If it's an ant or a flower or something, right? And it's like, wow, you know, that's actually quite novel to you, and yet to me it's just it's noise almost. You just don't even notice it. And I think just becoming a bit more sensitive to that, and also getting excited, with her as well, which has been it's been great. It's, you know, and it's enjoying those moments as much as possible. As it's been a gift. What about you?
I mean, similar. It's that kind of emotional, the expansion of that emotional range that you didn't know you had before. You know, I will never forget the day I met my son. Do you know what I mean? I forget lots of days, but that's a day that I'll never forget, just because of the feeling that I had. You know, it's like I've never felt this before. I remember never being that nervous in my entire life. You know, and you know, we all get nervous over a number of things, but I tend to not get too nervous. You know, I live this kind of stoic lifestyle, like, oh yeah, well, we're gonna die anyway, so it's the worst case scenario, I die. But I remember that day, it didn't feel like that at all. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, ever since, man, just having the privilege to see a life develop. Do you know what I mean? Like, once he was just this blob in my hands. Do you know what I mean? Not pretty helpless, you know. And now, you know, I've got to witness him over the last 6 years, and he is a whole person. He's a whole person, like, so different from me and so different from his mum. It's just individual. And the feeling, that feeling is very difficult to describe. Do you know what I mean? I haven't felt that. I didn't feel that feeling before I'd, you know, had a child. Just the level of pride I have for this being is immense. You know, it's like, wow, like I'm so proud of him just for even being here. Doesn't have to do anything. Just for the fact that you're here. And I think about where else is that in my life? You know, I'm proud that my mom's here. No, not really. I mean, she kind of had to have me, you know, otherwise I wouldn't exist. So, you know, but yeah. And again, my perspective has changed in that you kind of, after having a child, you kind of start to see everybody as a child. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're somebody's child. Everybody is somebody's child, you know. And there was a point in which they were just that blob in a hand, or that 5-6-year-old just trying to figure it out. So when there are people in my life or people in life that do things which I think, that's a bit weird, or you know, they slighted someone or me, I look at them again and it's like, you are just a child, you know, like you were just a child. I am too, you know, just a child. Someone was holding you and someone, you know, you was learning to write and all that stuff, you know, like you're the same, you know, and so it's definitely changed the way that I look at humanity. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like, we're all just these little children, you know, we've got a bit older, but we're just children, really, you know. And part of that is because part of that is because I still remember myself as a child, you know, and now I'm a dad, and okay, my back hurts a bit more, but you know, ultimately I'm the same person, you know. So
yeah. It's like, you know, I feel this. I've had a similar thinking as well previously, but yeah, our inner child is just like, it's there, and you see. It's funny when you see them as they interact with their friends, and it's like, oh, they got a crazy, funny dynamic, and they just say off the cuff things, now we kind of tone it down a bit, we be a bit more thoughtful, but yeah, it's great to seeing them navigate social interaction, you know, if that's with you or their friends or whatever, and develop that sort of level of communication. And it's also, you know, from a place of first principles, right? They'll just say stuff that they want, or, you know, they'll do stuff that they feel that they want to do. And then, you know, it's up to the parents to, and teachers to say, yeah, you know, yay or nay, or, you know, be careful or don't be careful. And that's quite interesting as well. Just, you know, as they learn how to manage themselves around the world and navigate themselves around the environment and world, it's interesting. Another thing that I've really grown to appreciate and learn is just reading stories. You know, every night is story time, and it's super important. And it's a great time for me to just relax with my daughter, and then just escape a little bit into this little world, this little storybook. It's those little things there that, you know, one, it improves my reading skills because I only really read like self-help books, and two, you know, it's just you know, it goes to the power of telling a story.
Yeah. Another thing is, and it's kind of, again, ties into, you know, we're all children, is the level of empathy I have for people has significantly increased. You know, I it's helped me understand, or given me at least the patience to try to understand people's positions. Do you know what I mean? Simply because, you know, there could be situations where my child is in a position that if I'm not understanding, it could, you know, it could hinder our relationship as father and son. So, you know, it's like almost all these opportunities when someone is saying something or someone's going through something, all these opportunities to kind of, practice, so that when my son inevitably goes through his life and is going through his life, I'm empathetic. And I think naturally, I can be empathetic, but naturally, you know me, man. I'm like, bro, you gotta get it together or get out of it. Do you know what I mean? It's like I can understand somebody's position, but I don't have much. I'll give you a piece of advice and take it or don't. Like, I'm right. If you don't take it, then that's on you. But I think in having a child, it's made me think, like, actually, no. Not actually no, but no, just give more time to this. Do you know what I mean? Like, people have all these types of feelings as to, and that's what leads them to whatever situation they're in. It's worth considering those feelings as opposed to just simply considering the situation. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, definitely increased my level of empathy. My level of sympathy is still pretty low. It's like, I try so hard. Oh, so many of our relationships, I try so hard to be sympathetic, man. But it's like, what? Like, you haven't learned this already, And almost like what you're saying. So it's like I struggle with this with my son, But luckily he's so good. I don't really I get tested more by adults with this stuff. But like you were saying before, they're almost like these blank canvases. Not so blank anymore, but they need programming, right? Like, they all need programming. Like, if the lesson isn't there, then how are they supposed to know? Do you know what I mean? And I think what makes me less sympathetic is that I'm aware that my son needs programming at times. So when I'm dealing with an adult, it makes me think, why the hell have you not been programmed for this yet? What is going on? Like how did you not get programmed for this? And the increase in empathy would be like, well, they had whatever upbringing they had. They've had their experiences. I don't know what's going on for them today. Things might be, weird today, and that's maybe why they're acting like it. But then it's like, but he's 6. Why does he know and this one doesn't, and they're 38 or whatever they are? It's like, what is this? So it's had this weird effect on my levels of sympathy. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know if that was the right answer. I know there's not a right answer, but that is me. Yeah.
So basically, if you ever see Aaron and you fell over or something in front of him, or your toes got run over, don't ask for help. Don't ask for any sympathy. Don't expect a card or roses. Like, it's yeah. It'll call an ambulance and say, look, I gotta go.
I'm notorious for it. I'm so notorious for it. It's like, oh yeah, well, if I can help you, then I will. But if I can't, then I'm out. Do you know what I mean? I'm not just here to sit and listen to this shit. Sorry. Like, with my son, I have to. He's my son. But you lot, not really, no.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah. And trust me, guys, I'm not a dick. I'm generally a good person. Just be good as well. Like, just don't be fucking up around me, because I'll just be like, well, I don't know. I don't even know them. Yeah.
So it's good to hear that your son has made you a better person. Like, clearly,
yeah. 51%,
some development
49%.
Points. Yeah, but net good.
Yeah, for sure. And if you could think about what you would want your daughter to see you as, what would that be?
Modern day philosopher.
Wow.
No, I'm joking. But that is one of the things as well, right? I didn't really, in my mind, when I was 20, I kind of wanted to really have, made it. When I say made it up, use quotes, but really be in a very, very, like, comfortable, good position that I didn't, have to work. And I had all these ideas before I had a child. That's what I wanted to be, or where I wanted to be in my life. And child came, and still got a job, right? And so I think it's just made me even more hungry. One, to provide, because when you look at these school fees and these all holidays, they're not cheap, right? But one, to provide, and two, just to be in a position, or create a position for me where my children could look at me and say, hey, he's developed his own thing, and that's always been quite something that's been key to me, like developing my own thing rather than saying, I got to get to work because my manager's going to like give me the sack, or just running out the door and having to put on a suit and just go to an office. And so I've always wanted to develop my own thing, that my child can see me and say, hey, my dad is a trier, he tries, and then I can share the stories of how many things I've tried and how many fails I've had, but he's tried and he succeeded, and that's the kind of that's what I like to pass down. What about you?
Sure. Before me, so are you saying that you'd want to be seen as like the helm of the empire?
Well, that's it, right? I mean, it's funny because your children put you in this bracket of incredibleness, right? Like, that's your dad. Like, you can lift them up and throw them around, and and you like. So it's funny because you talk about your ego. You're kind of looking at yourself through your child's eyes. You are their superhero. And so I feel like I need to show up and be that superhero. And part of me just feels like, obviously you want to be there and be there all the time and spend quality time, but also provide them as many opportunities as possible. And so that's where it is. That's what I'm going to do. That's what's going to keep the fire going.
Yeah. I like that, man. I like that a lot. Yeah, dude, similar to you, man. I think it's so important to be able to like have something that your child can walk into, or at least have the opportunity to walk into. If they decide to walk on their own path, that's fine. But if you've developed your business enough, hopefully there's a space for them at the table. Do you know what I mean? And if they ever want to take over whatever you've got going on in their way, then almost for me, that's like an achievement. It's like I've got something to give to you. You can walk into it and you can bring your children into it, and this is it. As for at least my son's image of me, I'd want him to just see me as like a wise person. Do you know what I mean? Like somebody that you can go to and get knowledge from. And somebody who's strong. It's interesting because ultimately he's going to see whatever he sees, and I can do my best to try and portray a particular image, but his experience of me is going to be unique to him. But personally, I'm really looking forward to when he becomes an adult. Probably mid-20s, and to see if we could actually be like friends, like best friends. Not best friends like we roll together all the time, because not that type of best friend, but like somebody who I truly understand, and they understand me quite well, and we could sit down and talk like adults about life, but still be his dad, still be that guiding figure, still be here to be like, well, son, I know you're seeing this girl and you're seeing that one, but if you bring them at the same time, I can cover for you, but I don't know about your mum. It could go wrong, so got to be careful. That was just a wild example off the top. But even that, in terms of morality, as he gets into his adulthood, I want to be part of his makeup of morality, I should say. And then when he gets into his adult life, hopefully it's taken him through to a point where if he's not sure about something, he can just come to me and not feel judged, not feel like, oh shit, I can't go to my dad with this. This is going to be, he's going to be disappointed or he's going to be like angry with me. I don't want him to feel those feelings at that point. But maybe it's a balance. Maybe there's a weird balance, because maybe growing up, the reason he will respect you, they say this, right? Like, respect doesn't really come through without fear. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not sure how much I subscribe to it, but I think there's an element of, at least fear of disappointment that children have towards their parents, like, and that kind of governs their behavior in a way. But yeah, by the time he becomes an adult, I wouldn't want him to feel as if he could ever disappoint me. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing you can do to disappoint me, like, but hopefully the things that he might do to disappoint me, which I won't really tell him about, he just, my efforts as a parent has steered him away from that. And that's more of a judgment on myself, really, I guess.
It's funny, just that one bit where, you have this sort of parenting approach where you want to be their friend and all that kind of stuff and best friends. But when you said that, House Party just came into my mind, the film. And when the guy's trying to sneak out and the dad just went wild and, got the belt and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's just funny how, like, parenting's changed from the 80s, 90s, 70s, and previously to that, to now. Like, we want to be like, we're just friends and, hey, get on. It's just quite funny. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, the roles have changed so much, right? Like, before you would have, like, I don't know, mothers with daughters and fathers with sons, and almost like, all right, this is the role you're about to walk into, so this is the role I have to play for you. Whereas now it seems to be a lot more flexible. It's like, I don't know, you can go live there if you want, you could dress like that if you want. It's not really. I feel now that there's more freedom to just love. Do you know what I mean? Maybe maybe that freedom was always there, and individually in families, that freedom's always there, always been shown. But that's what I personally would want to portray. You just have love. There's just love here. Don't worry about anything else. That's it.
That's it. Yeah. Start from a place of love, and everything will be all right.
Yeah. And then, in that second seat of the Ferrari, my son can go there. It's for him. That's what the second seat's for. Like, it's not for the missus. No. This is for the son. It's for the little boy. So yeah. And if I have more children, then I don't even know. Probably Ferrari's gonna have to not come out that often. I don't know. It goes back to being an empty seat. I don't want too much trouble. Yeah. So, Mr. Price, you got any more to add to that?
No, I think that's it. It's been an interesting conversation. I feel wiser from it.
Oh yeah. Well, maybe this is one that, in time we could show our children and be like, yeah, this is what we said about you all those years ago. And as you're listening to this, I hope you understand that we had your best interest at heart the whole time. So yeah, let's hope they get that. And to everybody listening, thanks once again. Sending love to you all. Yeah. Ciao.